What's up everybody, my name is Brenden and this is BigBearB Creative. In today's episode, I want to talk a little bit about landscape photography. It's one of my favorite forms of photography and I would love for people to experience it as well, but in order to do that you kind of need to know a couple things and how to take them. And that comes down to choosing certain settings on your camera. Now really there's three settings that you have to worry about, and those are going to be your shutter speed, your aperture, and your ISO. Fortunately for us, there are different settings on the camera that you could choose for different things to kind of just help you out so you don't have to worry about as many things. Things like the aperture priority or shutter priority, those are going to make sure that you could set that, just the shutter or not the shutter, the ISO, the shutter or the aperture to what you want it to be, and then the camera will do the rest. Now this is really great for beginners who are getting into landscape photography or just photography in general, but we're wanting to master landscape photography here. We want to become pros at it. So that all comes down to knowing how to use the manual setting or function on your camera, and that even could go down to the focus too. But really for today we're going to be talking about the shutter speed, the aperture, and the ISO. So starting with shutter speed. Shutter speed is basically how long the lens is open to allow light to come in. So that's going to change kind of how bright the image is, how dark the image is, or it could even be the difference between a quick action shot or a long exposure, as long exposures are a huge part of landscape photography. So really if you're wanting to do long exposures, there isn't a necessary set thing to do, except for when it comes to astrophotography, which is kind of a sub-form of landscape photography. For that you really want to work in a bulb mode. Unless you don't have the remote, then in that case 30 seconds is your max that you could have the shutter open for. But besides that, you really just have to mess with what you want and the look that you're going for. So if you're wanting a long exposure, typically you want to have your shutter be less than, or not less than, you want it to be a second or more. And that's going to allow you to really get that motion of water or trees if you want that kind of ethereal look too. But if you're wanting a quick action, that's going to mean you're going to need a lot less than a second. And really, again, like I said earlier, it's really going to come down to what you're wanting. If you're having to expose for a really bright sky with a dark foreground or the opposite of that, you're really just going to have to mess with what you want. And if you have certain programs like Photoshop, you could do what's called photo bracketing, which is you're going to expose for the highlights and you're going to expose for the shadows. And then you do a whole bunch of stuff to mix and match to where you could basically pull in the good part of both images and make your image perfecto. But that's not what I do, because if you've watched any of these photo editing videos that I've done and past videos, you'll know that I love to do moodier shots. So I'm going to, normally, I'm going to have my shutter speed a little bit slower. If I'm going for a more still shot or quick action shot, I'm going to have that be a little bit slower, so that way I'm not bringing out, wait no, I'm not going to have it be slow. I'm going to have it be a little bit quicker, so that way I'm not letting as much light in. Sorry about that. But yeah, because it's different, because smaller numbers, different, yeah. If you've gotten into photography, you know what I'm talking about here. But yeah, so I'm going to have it be quicker, so that way I'm not letting as much light in. But if I'm doing long exposures, yeah, it's going to be a second more. If I can, I'm going to do a bulb mode, like I said, for astrophotography. Or if you're using a lot of different ND filters, you can also use the bulb mode for that. The bulb remote is also going to help with camera shake, which is a thing you do have to worry about if you're doing some longer exposures. But that's a whole other different video, which we'll probably get to at a later date. But yeah, so for the shutter speed, for long exposures, a second or more. For quick action shots, less than a second. Now let's move on over to your aperture, as that's another huge part. So for your aperture, it's again like the shutter speed. You would think it'd be a little, like it's the opposite of what you think it would be looking at the numbers. But basically, the larger the number, the smaller your aperture is. An aperture is basically going to change how much you can get in focus. So if you want, for a landscape, as we're talking about here, if you want the whole thing in focus, you're most likely going to need about f9 to f16. That's typically the best range that you can get that's going to allow for the best sharpness and the most amount of clarity and focus of the frame. Some cameras have their certain hit spots where it's the best that you could get of everything. So you just really, again, you have to mess around with it, see which is best for your camera and what best works for you. For me, I typically stick between f8 to f16. Normally, if I'm going for a landscape photography, I'm going to go for about f11 because that's the best for my camera and the lenses that I'm using. But the opposite of that, if you don't want everything in focus, you're going to want a much lower number, so like f3, f2.8, stuff like that. You're going to want a much lower number because that's going to mean the lens is open much wider, which is going to decrease the amount that is going to be in focus. So if you have a subject like a tree or something that's in the foreground, and there's different kind of trees in the background that are more vertical, very copy paste like, but then you have this funky tree in the front, you don't want the back trees to be in focus. So you're going to want that lower aperture there, so that way you can blow out the background so that's not in focus, and you could just see the focus of what your shot is, what your photograph is all about, and that's that tree. That's kind of what I do here. I have my aperture set at f.5, or not 0.5, f5, which is going to mean that I'm in focus, all of me is focused, not just my nose or my eyes, but the background is not in focus, so you're not peeping at what all my posters are. But feel free to. Side note, those posters, there's a bunch of them, but if you could find the ones to point out to my 2 favorite movies, leave that down in the comment section below. And the first one that answers correctly, I might send a code to my apparel so you can get a discount or something like that. So go ahead, check that out back there and down there. Let me know if you're right. You get some good merch. We'll talk about that at the end. But yeah, so back to apparel. Not apparel, so that's in the end. Aperture. So yeah, you're gonna want either a low aperture to break up the low number aperture to break up your focus versus what else is in the photo, or you're gonna want a much larger one, f8 to f16 or f9, kind of depends person to person, but like I said, you're gonna have to find the specific one that's best for your camera, that middle ground for the sharpness and the focus. But yeah, that's typically going to be between f8 or 9 to f16. You don't really want to go behind that or back larger than that, which is smaller than that. That's weird. But yeah, you don't want to do much more than f16, otherwise you're going to start losing the quality of your photograph. So then that brings us to the last one, which is ISO or ISO, depending however you prefer to pronounce it. But this one is really great because there isn't necessarily a wrong or right thing to do here. You're going to set your shutter speed and your aperture to get the kind of photograph that you want. But if it's too dark or it's too bright, you're going to adjust that ISO either up or down to flatten out your image. If you're a lucky person and you have one of those histograms that pop up on your live view screen or anything like that while you're taking the photograph, that could help you make sure that you have the things you want exposed correctly. Or if you don't, typically it's a thing in the settings that you could go into and have it to where after you take the photo you could check it out, and it'll help you there, but that does mean that if it's not what you want, you are going to have to take the photo again. But that's perfectly fine. That happens a lot in photography, especially landscape photography, and unfortunately you might miss certain elements of things you're looking for, but that's just what happens. It's life. Never goes exactly how you want it, right? But yeah, so ISO, you're basically just going to raise that, lower it depending on what you're looking for. My advice for ISO is to always have it be the smallest amount that you can. It helps for me because I like more moodier photos, so I'm not trying to take in a lot from what's in the shadows. I want the shadows to be shadows. But you can also recover a lot of shadows post-editing than you can highlights. So I always say err on the caution of shadow rather than highlights, because highlights, when they're blown out, they're very hard to get corrected. So always have it be lower. If you can shoot ISO 100, at least that's what my base one is on my camera, perfect. Always aim for your base ISO. I know for some cameras it's 50, some is 100, just whatever your base ISO is, always aim for that, because that's going to mean that your photograph is the clearest, most perfect. You're not going to have any of those noise that comes in the shadows if you're having to expose too much or in the light or anything like that. You don't want to have the noise unless that's your thing, then by all means have the noise. But typically you don't want to have as much noise in your photos, which is why a lot of photo editors have a denoise function. But yeah, so always err towards the side of the base. But it is also great because you can raise and lower it depending on your camera. Some are really good up to 6400. Some start to teeter out at about 3200. Mine's around 3200. I could go a little bit above that, but I typically don't. That's normally when I'll just have the exposure, the shutter speed open longer, so that way I'm allowing more light in. but that's just the way I like to work with things. Like I said, photography, it's really all about what your style is and how you see what your subject is and how you capture it. So play around with these settings now that you know the main three that you need to worry about. There's also those little functions that I said that are typically on the dial on the top of your calculator, on the top of your camera, that'll help you in training to know what you are looking for with each one. So if you don't know what it is, let's say you know what you want your focus range to be, right? So you want to see the tree in the foreground, but you don't want to see the trees in the background. Well, you could use your aperture priority to set that, let's say at like a f3.5, so you could get that front tree in focus, and then take a look at what your camera does with the other settings, the shutter speed and the ISO, to kind of get a understanding of how you can do that manually, or if it's even something you like. And if it's not something you like, you're gonna have to switch on over to that manual mode and go from there. Also, a lot of cameras do have a landscape mode, like the aperture and the shutter speed priority, all that kind of stuff. So you can check that out too if you're not quite sure and you don't want to waste that shot. But like I said, we're trying to master photography here and landscape photography, become pros at it, maybe sell some fantastic prints, which we'll talk about mine at the end. But you want to sell those fantastic prints, make a little money on the side, or you want this to become your primary source of income. So you're going to need to learn how to master your camera, and that goes down to the manual mode. And the last tip I have for you, don't really trust the focus on the LCD screen or whatever that you have on the back. Always use that little tiny one that you have to put your eye up to, because that one's going to be the most clear and you're really going to see what is in focus or not. If you're really, the only reason you should use that back screen is to check if you have the shadows too dark or the highlights too bright, and then just go back to that little viewfinder on the top, because that's really going to give you the best option for you. So yeah, that's everything I wanted to cover here. If you guys have any more questions about landscape photography, or you tried to do this but it didn't work, or you tried to do that and it gave you this instead of this, let me know down in the comment section below, or you can follow me on any of my social medias. You can message me there, let me know what troubles you're having. If you experimented with something and it turned out great, let me know what happened. Or you could even tag me on your photos. I'd love to give my input on them, and just start our own little community on all the social medias on this one too. It'll just be fun. Landscape photography is fun, no matter what you say. It's fun. But yeah, so back to what I was talking about earlier, the things I said I was going to bring at the end. That's going to be my apparel and my photo prints. I do sell apparel. It's all of the graphic designs that I've created on this channel. Well, not all of them. One's a business logo that I'm not going to sell that on a t-shirt because it's not my business logo. I did that for a client. But yeah, so you could check out you could check out the graphic design videos that I did. Give those a like if you like them. And also go check out the shirts and apparel, tank tops, hoodies, long sleeves. I got it all. Check those out. They're going to be on Teespring and on my merch page. I'll link them down in the, not the comment section, but in the description box below. And then also photo prints. Those will be down there too. I'm a photographer. I'm going to sell photo prints. It's just, it's a nice way to... Okay, and we're back. Sorry about that. My camera battery died and we were so close to the end. But yeah, so we're... Photo prints. I sell them. A lot of photographers sell them. If you guys are looking for something to hang in your home, in your office, anywhere, and you need some landscape photo prints, that's basically what I have for sale right now. Go ahead and check mine out. Again, they're going to be on my merch page, but they're also going to be on my Zazzle store. I'll link them down in the description below as well. And kind of any other things you might want to know if you want to check out my website by any means, or what songs I use in this video, anything like that, that's all going to be down in the description box below. So I think that wraps it all up. Shutter speed, aperture, ISO. You have different settings on the top of your camera to help you learn, but really want to master that manual mode. Focus, you could all change depending on, again, on what you're looking for, but we'll do a whole different video on that soon. So be sure to like this video so that I know you enjoyed it, you learned something. And then also make sure that you subscribe down below too. Again, it's going to help me know that you're learning something, you want to join in on this, and that we're all just going to have fun here. And if there's anything that you want me to talk about photography, landscape photography, or any other kinds of photography that you might want to learn a little something else about, let me know down in the comment section below. I would love to help you out. But that brings us to the end here, so thank you for watching this video. Hope you have a great day, and go be creative.